that's like the whole purpose of a lot of what we do, right? In order to do anything in life, you need energy, right? Even just to like sit there and like breathe. Um, you think that you're not really expending energy in like the sense of like you're not using any energy because you're resting, but your body is always and your cells are always using energy. So don't ever take that for granted. You're always using energy. And so that's why we need to talk about this, and we're devoting a whole lesson to it. So, have you guys ever heard of like thermodynamics? This first law, there are laws. There are three laws of thermodynamics. The main one that we're gonna talk about is just the first one, and it's kind of like the first law of matter. Do you guys know what the first law of matter is about? Like,
It cannot be created or destroyed.
very good. So what do you think the first law of thermodynamics in terms of like energy is also saying?
Energy can't be created nor destroyed.
Exactly. Energy itself also cannot be created or destroyed. You can't just like get it out of thin air or just like destroy or get rid of it. So it's the same concept, right? Energy cannot be created or destroyed. So what can be done with it then if it can't be totally created or totally destroyed?
Be like converted.
Exactly. It can be converted and it can be like transferred from one entity to another, and it can be converted into different types, right? Exactly. So it can be transformed. Do you guys know the difference between kinetic energy and potential energy?
Isn't kinetic like it's like moving, and then potential is just like it's being waiting to be used?
Exactly. So kinetic energy, yeah, it refers to energy that you have, that something has that's moving, right? Whereas, yes, potential energy is energy that's sort of stored in some sort of form and that isn't necessarily being used, but it has the potential to give off a lot of energy should it somehow need to be accessed, but it's not actually using the energy at that point, or that energy is not being like exerted or something, right? So can you guys can you give me some, so obviously like someone who's like running or something that's moving, like a ball that's moving has a certain level of kinetic energy, and you guys will do a ton of this in physics your junior year, so I'm not gonna, be too concerned about, but I do want you guys to know, like, just be familiar at like recognize these words, right? So certain types of potential energy, and the main one we're going to talk about is the potential energy that's stored in chemical bonds, right? So if there's a bond between two atoms, even though, like, again, atoms are moving, right? So there is like a certain degree of like of potential energy, but there's also kinetic energy, but there's also this degree of potential energy that's stored between those two atoms that can be released if it needs to be in other circumstances, right? So okay. I'm not sure why my husband's calling me. It could be an emergency. Can you guys hold on one second? I think I need to answer this. All right, are you guys still there? Okay. Sorry about that. So energy can't be created or destroyed. It's just transformed into different types. So potential, again, you can have potential energy in bonds. You can have potential energy in a spring. Have you guys ever heard of like elastic potential energy? So like if a spring is like really like what's the word? Compressed, you can like actually put energy into that, because when it like releases, it can like, exert this like whole big amount of energy. You can have gravitational potential energy. Have you guys ever heard of that? So like, obviously if you put a rock at the top of a hill, or like if you raise it up in the air, it has the potential to fall based on gravity, right? So that's another type of potential energy. It's called gravitational potential energy. So anyway, there are all these other types of energy. So something doesn't necessarily have to be moving in order to have energy. But anyway, the energy can be converted between these two different types, right? So these are just some examples. So like heat energy, light energy, sound. So when something makes like a really loud noise, it is, you know, it releases energy in the waves and sound waves. Magnetic energy. So if you have two like poles, like magnetic poles, that obviously like have a certain attraction to each other, so that will create like a force of energy. Electricity, chemicals. So these are just like all some examples of different types of energy that can be converted to and from each other by certain like specialized like reactions and stuff. Okay. All right. So then there's this concept in chemistry and in biology called Gibbs free energy, and basically that's like the energy. This is like it's like how much energy like a certain molecule or a certain substance has to use like at its disposal, right? It's almost like you could think of it as like just cash, how much it can give and take in any like given transaction, right? So if I'm a certain atom or a certain compound, and then I like go and interact with someone else, I could either like gain more energy, like earn more money out of that transaction, or I could end up at a loss of that energy from that transaction, right? So it depends on what the nature of the other thing is that I'm interacting with. So, you know, by nature also, like if we're thinking about this as money, some molecules just naturally, by their configuration, have more energy than other ones do, right? It's kind of like an unfair fact of life. But again, it's just like by nature, right? And so when those molecules have more potential then to release energy because they have more energy, right? And then the net like change in energy. So if like there's like this free energy, if like, you know, a certain molecule has energy and then it does some sort of reaction and then releases some extra energy, that extra energy that's released is called delta G. And delta always means like a change, right? You guys know in algebra, right? Delta X over delta Y, or delta Y over delta X, right? But yeah, so delta means change, right? So this is like sort of like the excess, like the change that either is, you know, if you have excess energy on the front in the reactant side, or if you have excess energy on the product side, right? Okay. Oops, sorry. So it's the difference between the products and the reactants. So in this case, you always subtract the reactants from the products, right? What if the products have less energy than the reactants then? What would the value of delta G be then? If the products like have less energy or less Gibbs free energy, negative, then it's going to be negative, right? Good. Okay. All right. So let's try. So if the G of the products is greater than the reactants, then it's not going to be negative. It's just going to be positive, right? Okay, so we're starting here, right? Here's the extra energy, the Gibbs free energy of the reactants, right? And then the G of the products. This is a graph, right? So the G of the products is up here, right? So the products minus the reactants is going to be. It's going to be like, so there's a big jump in energy, right? Do you guys see that? So do you think energy was put in to get up to here, or was it taken out to get up to here?
Put in. It
was put in, right? So we had to put energy in. So delta G is positive. Energy had to be put in to make this reaction go, right? Do you think that's something? Oh, so when you put energy in, what's the prefix for in? When you like, anyone? It's called endergonic, which means energy is getting put in, right? And do you think that this reaction wants to happen or not? If you have like, you know, like a house, let's say like you have like a little shack or something, right? And then you want to get like a larger house. Is it just like natural that you'd go and like move into a larger house? Is that like likely or like favorable?
No.
No, right? Because it requires a lot of work to be put in to get that jump, right? So these types of reactions in which the energy, the Gibbs free energy of the products is greater than that of the reactants, is an endergonic reaction. So it requires energy to be put in, and it's not typically spontaneous or favorable, right? Like nothing sort of just wants to, says like, oh, suddenly I'm just going to jump up to this energy level. Right? So something has to happen in order for this energy to go in, for it to jump from this energy level to this energy level, right? Do you guys understand this like awful graph here? Yeah. Okay. So the other, like the reverse situation is, and this is what I just said before. So if the G of the products is actually less than the reactants, right? So here's the G of the products, right? Here's the G of the reactants, and here's the G of the products, right? So what happened to the energy? Products. Go ahead.
The energy like went down. It was negative.
Exactly. So the products had way more energy. The reactants had way more energy than the products. The reactants had more energy than the products. I should have put reactants and products on the other sides. I'm sorry for the confusion. So basically it's jumping down, right? And so what's happening to energy in this case? So the energy was originally in these guys, but then the reactants had way less energy than those did. So what happened to energy then? It got
removed.
It can't be totally destroyed, right? So it's going to just be released into like the atmosphere. Okay, so the energy here gets released out of these products that were storing that energy in their bonds. Sorry, the reactants that were storing the energy in their bonds, and then the energy gets released out into the air. And it could be in the form of heat, in the form of light, in the form of sound, right? So if this is endergonic, what do you think this one's going to be called?
Exergonic.
Good, exergonic. And do you think that it's going to be favorable or not favorable?
Favorable.
Favorable, right? Or spontaneous, right? When do compounds want to have like a lot of extra energy, so they're like kind of like, just like brimming with all this extra like energy? When you have too much like energy, it actually makes something kind of unstable, right? So they do like to be at like this lower energy level, and then so this will happen spontaneously because it is easier just for something that's like high up to kind of fall down and then release energy, right? As opposed to like something that's already low down to like suddenly jump up to something else and absorb the energy, right? So you do have to memorize these kind of relationships. So you should know that if the G of the products is greater than the reactants, because delta G is products minus the reactants, then this one's going to be positive. If it is positive, that means that it's endergonic and not favorable because it's absorbing energy, right? Whereas the opposite, if the reactants is way greater than the products, and so it's releasing energy in this process, then the delta G is going to be negative, and that is a favorable or spontaneously possible reaction. Okay? Do those kind of make sense? Yes, no, yes. Okay. I'm assuming yes, because I didn't hear anyone say anything. Okay. So, do you guys remember talking about the word metabolism?
Yes.
What was it?
It was like a change. I don't remember.
Okay, so it's one of the key characteristics of life, right? To create or to determine that something's living.
Isn't it like the speed it breaks down like energy?
Sort of. So it is it's the use of breaking down materials, or it can actually be building up materials. So it's the sum of both catabolic reactions, which means you're breaking things down, or anabolic reactions, which you're building up. So it's both of those like processes that are happening in your body. Because what you do is when you eat food, what do?
You break it down.
You break it down because you need to like get those materials like proteins or carbohydrates or whatever into their like sort of more basic like little forms. And then what do? You just like poop them out, or what do you do? Once you like eat the stuff and break it down, what do you need to survive yourself? You need to like make your own, muscles and like DNA, you need to like help your cells, recreate DNA. You need to build up, like cell membrane. So you need those like supplies. So catabolic is when you take something in and you break it down, but you don't just break it down for the heck of it. You then build them up into new molecules that you can use for your own body, right? So metabolism is basically the sum of both catabolic and anabolic reactions in your body, right? So catabolic, again, think of like dissecting a cat, breaks down things, right? It helps you digest, and it helps, do you guys remember, this is like, going back into our like biochem days, but essentially it's like the hydrolysis, right? So hydrolysis is adding or removing water?
Removing. Or like breaking down the water.
Think about it. So what was the process in which water was made? Oh no. You guys forgot all this. So how do you combine two monomers? What's the process? Remember, you have two hydroxyl groups next to each other, and then the O from one of them takes the H off of the other one, and then it forms either an ester bond or a glycosidic linkage or
It was dehydration synthesis.
Thank you. And so dehydration synthesis was when water came out. So hydrolysis, remember, was the opposite of that.
Hydrolysis is when you put the water in. It's like when the monomers like separate again, and then it's hydrolysis because water is going back into them.
Exactly. Good. So hydrolysis is putting water in order to break them down into monomers, right? And do you see how like the breaking of them into monomers is catabolic, right? All right, good. So the opposite would be anabolic, right? So anabolic is you're building things up, or you're polymerizing them. And what's the process again that polymerizes them? If you have two monomers, dehydration synthesis or condensation. Good. All right. So some examples of these are like DNA replication, right? Because you're polymerizing. What's the enzyme called that actually like adds on the bases during DNA replication?
Polymerase.
DNA polymerase. Good. So polymerase polymerizes these nucleotides, right? Protein synthesis is also an anabolic reaction because you're using dehydration synthesis to create a peptide bond. Do you guys remember what a peptide bond was? It was a bond between what two functional groups in amino acids? Oh gosh. See, this is why it's not good to not have a midterm or a final, right? What are the two functional groups in a protein that combine to form like a polypeptide? What are the two functional groups in a protein to begin with? Like the main two functional groups. Remember, there are 4 different parts of an amino acid. So there was the alpha carbon, right? There was a little H.
It's the isn't it like a carboxyl?
That's one. Good.
And then it's like an amino group?
Yes. Thank you. Perfect.
Okay.
So the carboxyl group and the amino group, remember they have OH on them and then an OH on both of them, right? And sorry, an OH on the carboxyl group and then the H on the amino group. the OH goes and takes one of the H's off the amino group, and then it forms, and then that carbon that was connected to the carboxyl group goes and attaches to the N of the amino group to make a peptide bond, right? Good. And so that's how amino acids polymerize to make proteins, right? That's like the primary level of proteins. All right, good. I'm just seeing how much you guys are, like how much you can access this old material, and I'm kind of scared for you guys because Mr. Temsek might eat you alive senior year. But actually, even kids who don't have who had him, even kids who have, had midterms and finals in their freshman year for bio, they still forget all this stuff. So I'm just, it's not going to be that big of a deal, so don't worry. Anyway, okay, so these are examples of anabolic reactions. And polymerization, again, it's going to be dehydration synthesis that creates those things, right? Okay, so catabolic reactions, right? So you're breaking things down, right? So these are actually exergonic, because where was energy stored in originally? In a molecule, it's stored in the bonds. Exactly. And so but we're breaking down those bonds, then each individual piece that it was broken down to, so each monomer now has less energy, like the sum of those monomers now has less energy than the total of that original compound, right? So what happens is the rest is all this extra energy kind of floating around, and then that actually can be used for another reaction, right? So catabolic reactions, they're breaking things down. So you're breaking bonds, right? Which means that when those bonds are broken, you're releasing energy, the Gibbs free energy, the difference of the Gibbs free energy, right? These are favorable because they want to be broken down, because they want to be at a lower energy state. And again, that's going to release that energy. But again, this energy doesn't just disappear. You can't have if you have a certain amount of energy in this one compound, and then you have less energy in those products, right? Then there's going to be this extra energy that was released. It's not like you can have more energy on one side than the other. The other side has to compensate. They have to be equal, because you can't create or destroy. So the extra energy is now just going to be in free flowing form, right? That can be used for something else. Okay. And then an anabolic reaction. So again, you have to invest something in order to build up, you have to put energy into forming these new bonds, right? So is it going to be exergonic or endergonic?
Endergonic.
It's going to be endergonic, right? It's going to be unfavorable. It's not going to happen just on itself. It might need the help of an enzyme or some sort of other type of catalyst, right? And it's also going to require energy. So the net delta G for this one is going to be what? Delta G. So the change of energy from the beginning, from the reactants to the change to the products, is it going to be positive delta G or negative delta G if you're breaking things down?
Negative.
It's going to be negative, because the energy gets released because the reactants have more energy than the products, right? So you're going down, right? What about anabolic? So if it's an anabolic reaction, that means it's endergonic, which means that the products have more or less energy than the reactants.
More.
The products have more energy because you need to put stuff in to make that energy and make those new bonds. So is that going to be a positive delta G or a negative delta G?
Positive.
Positive delta G, right? Okay. You guys, it sounds like you're on top of it. Okay. So let's try this reaction. And remember, energy can't be created or destroyed, right? So here's sucrose, right? Sucrose is what kind of molecule? Do you guys remember?
Carbohydrate.
Good. What kind of carbohydrate? What level? And the clue is right here.
Disaccharide.
A disaccharide.
Disaccharide. Good. Okay. So let's say sucrose has 10 units of energy, right? And then we break it down, right? By dehydration, no, by hydrolysis into these two component parts, so fructose and glucose, but total those two have 7 units of energy, right? Within their, themselves, right? That means, but we can't create or destroy energy, so that means that we have this other energy that was released. How much energy was released? Here.
3 units.
It's going to be 3 units, right? And this is a catabolic reaction. You guys recognize that because we're breaking it down, right? Is it endergonic or exergonic?
Exergonic.
Exergonic because it's releasing energy here, right? And because the delta G, so if we had 7 minus 10, what's the delta G going to be? Plus or minus? Like positive or negative?
Negative.
Negative, right? So we know that it's going to be exergonic because it's negative and it releases that energy, that extra 3 units, right? And is it going to be favorable or not favorable?
Favorable.
Good. Do you guys all see where I'm going with this? So the total amount of energy on both sides has to be the same. The total, right? So if this one is greater than this one, that means that the energy that, like the difference, right, needs to be on that side of it, right? And it needs to be in the amount of the difference, right? So this would be 3 over here. But when you subtract the products from the reactants, then you get a negative number. So you know that the energy is going to be on this side and not on that side, right? Okay. So, but you're going to be able to you're going to have to tell me whether these are endergonic, exergonic, etc., right? So this one's a little different because it's not just like one thing breaking into 2, but there are new bonds being formed, right? But you're given that the total energy of AB and C, the total energy within the bonded compounds on this side is 150, and the total amount of energy on this side of A and then BC together, right? Total is 100, right? So we know that in breaking this bond and forming the bond between AB, what had to happen to energy?
It had to be added.
It had to be added, right? So does that mean that, and overall, how much energy had to be put in order to make this bond?
50.
It had 50 units of energy, right? Exactly. Is this catabolic or anabolic?
Anabolic.
It's considered anabolic. Yeah, exactly. Because you're kind of technically it had to be catabolic to break down BC to begin with. But overall, since it's going up, the main thing is the formation of this one is considered anabolic here, right? It's going to be endergonic because you're putting energy in order to get the final products. And it's not going to be favorable unless under certain conditions where there's this extra energy lying around that can be invested to make this happen. Okay? Good? Okay. And then, lastly, I just want you guys to be we're not going to get into the chemical structures or the real nitty gritty of these molecules, but you have to know that there are certain molecules that are just kind of like names, household names that you just have to kind of know. Right. So there's ATP. You guys know that, right? That's a huge it's actually a nucleotide. It has 3 phosphates, right? But each time that's broken down, you can it has a huge release of energy. So basically this is considered an energy carrier molecule, and it carries energy from one place to another where it needs to be used, right? NADPH, this is another high energy carrying molecule, right? So it can carry energy in the form of these hydrogen atoms, right? And you guys will see that come into play in photosynthesis, right? NADH, that's another one that actually is used in cellular respiration. So we'll talk about that in a few days too. And then finally FADH2, that's another one. So all of these are carrying the energy in that hydrogen, right? Those extra hydrogens there. Whereas this one carries it in that those phosphate bonds. But in any case, you just have to know that you have to recognize these and know that these guys are pretty much they're they're pretty much like trucks. That's why I have them in like truck form, and they just like transport energy from one place to another. Okay, so they carry it around. Just recognize those. Is that okay? All right, and this is the last thing that we'll do for today, but I do want you to memorize this. So have you guys heard of oxidation reduction reactions? No? In chemistry, you'll do like a ton of these, so not to worry if you haven't done it before. But I just want to give you like a little preview on what oxidation and reduction means, right? And it's really in the form of transferring electrons, right? So, and it's between compounds. Like, so we know like covalent bonds share electrons, polar covalent bonds share electrons unequally. Ionic bonds give or take electrons, right? But there are certain reactions in which, certain molecules can receive electrons or give electrons, right? And those are called oxidation reduction reactions. And basically, like certain molecules can take an electron and then like pass it on to another one, right? And so that's what happens in these reactions. And the way to remember it is oil rig. So oxidation stands for oxidation is loss, meaning it's a loss of reaction of electrons, right? So if I give an electron to someone, then that process is called oxidation, right? And I would say that I was oxidized, right? Because I lost this electron, right? And think about the receiver's perspective, right? The receiver, what happened to the receiver? They gained electrons, right? But electrons are something negative, right? So they're not going to be oxidized, they're going to be reduced, meaning they got electrons, right? So the way to remember this is oxidation is loss of electrons, reduction is gain of electrons, right? So you have to know so if I accepted an electron from someone else, or if I accepted 2 electrons from someone else, I would be said to be reduced and they were oxidized, right? Okay. So yeah, if something loses electrons, it's said to be oxidized. If something gains electrons, it's said to be reduced. Okay? Easy, hard, easy, right? Okay. So, any questions? Are there any questions on the worksheet that I didn't answer? No? Yeah, I answered all these, right? All right, so just try to review those in your, in your minds, and think about like what all those, like what positive delta G means, what negative delta G means, what endergonic, exergonic, catabolic, anabolic, oxidation, reduction. Those are pretty much like the main concepts that I want you guys to take away from today. Tomorrow we're going to do photosynthesis. So basically, what is photosynthesis? Can someone tell me what photosynthesis is? Just like offhand, you guys should know this, right?
It's like converting the sunlight into glucose and energy for the plant to use, and then it like releases oxygen and it takes carbon dioxide.
Wait, it takes carbon dioxide and changes carbon dioxide into glucose. It doesn't release carbon dioxide, but it does release oxygen. You're right about that, right? It releases oxygen, and it takes in water and carbon dioxide and releases oxygen and glucose, right? So we're going to split up photosynthesis into 2 days because I think doing it all in one day is like a little too much. So tomorrow we're going to talk about the light reactions. There are 2 sections. There are 2 parts of photosynthesis, and they both occur in different parts of the leaf of the chloroplast, right? So we're going to talk about the light reactions tomorrow. Then we'll talk about the non-light or the light independent reactions on Thursday. And then you guys will have your quiz on photosynthesis on Friday.
I think
Okay.
this worksheet has the questions for photosynthesis on it.
Oh, it does? Yeah, okay, so, yeah, it does. This is, yeah. You guys don't have to do, you don't have to do those until, so then I guess you don't have to hand it in until Friday after we've done all the photosynthesis stuff. Is it both parts of photosynthesis? Let me see. Does it talk about the light, the Calvin cycle, or?
Yeah.
It does, right? Okay, so good. That's great then. Yes, you guys. Then you're fine. So I'll make that worksheet. I'll go ahead and edit it, and I'll make it due on Friday, so you can use it to help study for your quiz. Okay, you guys do want a quiz on Friday, right? Still. I mean, whether you won or not, so yeah, we'll have a quiz this Friday, and then, did Dr. D talk to you guys yet or not? About Monday? No? Okay, well,
No.
something I think on Monday, I'm gonna give you guys part of her quiz because she wants everyone to be taking it at the same time. Yeah. She wants everyone to be taking some quiz at the same time. So I think that I'm going to be giving you guys a quiz for the first 10 minutes or something on Monday. Her quiz, right? You guys are expecting a quiz from her soon, right?
Will we be in this call or Dr. D's call?
In this call. So, but you'll be in this call, but you'll be doing her Google form from her Google Classroom, right? I'm pretty sure this is happening. We haven't finalized the plans yet, but just, I think that's what's happening on Monday. But then we're going to go ahead and move on to respiration. I think we'll still have plenty of our own time, but that's just in the beginning to help her out. So she can, just get it all over with in one shot. Okay. All right. Well, have a good day, guys. And I'll change the thing and I'll post the PowerPoint right away. I'm going to do it now before I do anything else. And if I don't, then please email me right away and tell me. Okay. All right. So I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Bye.
Bye.